In this video, we break down how intelligence teams tracked one of Al-Qaeda's most wanted figures, and what it actually took to narrow down a target that was hidden among millions of people.
It's like 6 in the morning on Saturday. My phone rings. It's the chief.
In the years following 9/11, this kind of call became routine inside intelligence circles. The United States had shifted into a global manhunt posture, where suspected Al-Qaeda figures could surface anywhere, often with little warning and limited initial intelligence.
And he says, "You got to come in right away. Something happened." I said, "Bad?" He said, "No, but come." So I speed over there. It was the chief, the deputy chief, the chief ops, the FBI chief, and me. And my chief says, "We got a cable from headquarters that Abu Zubaydah is somewhere in the country and we have to capture him. We have to take him alive." Everybody turns and looks at me. I'm like, great. I went back into my office and I said, "Anybody know who Abu Zubaydah is?"
At the time, Al-Qaeda operated as a decentralized network. Leadership figures were known, but information was often fragmented. Even senior operatives could be aware of a name without having a full intelligence picture attached to it.
And one of them was like, "Yeah, I just read a piece about him in Time magazine. He's the number 3 in Al-Qaeda." I'm like, right. I go, "Well, we got to catch him." They go, "Yeah, he's here somewhere. We got to catch him." So when everybody turned to look at me, I go, "You guys," I go, "this country's the size of Texas. It's got 220 million people. What do you mean, catch him? You got to narrow it down for me somehow."
This was the core challenge of the global war on terror. Unlike traditional conflicts, there were no front lines. Targets were embedded within civilian populations, often moving constantly, making large-scale search operations nearly impossible without precise intelligence.
And one of them says, "Well, he's constantly moving," which makes it harder. He's moving between Lahore and Faisalabad. So I came up with a couple of just terrible ideas, terrible, unworkable ideas. So I said to the chief, "Listen, I need a targeting analyst."
By the mid-2000s, the CIA had shifted heavily toward data-driven targeting. Rather than relying solely on informants, analysts began mapping networks, tracking communications, relationships, and movement patterns to identify high-value targets.
So a targeting analyst is different from the kind of analysis that I did. A targeting analyst goes through reams of data, sometimes millions of pieces of data. So I said, "I've got a buddy at headquarters who's a targeting analyst, and he's really good, and I trust him."
This role became central to counterterrorism operations. Targeting analysts were responsible for turning massive amounts of raw intelligence, phone records, surveillance reports, financial data, into something operational teams could act on.
This operation was so highly classified that there were only a handful of us who knew. We never told the Pakistanis who it was. We said he was a big fish, and so we ended up calling him Mr. Fish.
Secrecy like this reflects a deeper reality of U.S.-Pakistan cooperation at the time. While Pakistan was officially an ally, intelligence sharing was often selective due to concerns about leaks or divided loyalties within local agencies.
So I sent an email to my friend, and I said, "Dude, can you get to Pakistan like right now?" I said, "There's a major operation. We'll read you into it when you get here. I can't tell you who it is, but I need your help." And 24 hours later, there he is. I picked him up at the airport, and he's like, "What's up?" And I said, "We've got a lead on Abu Zubaydah." He's like, "Oh my God, you're kidding me." I said, "No, and we're freaking close, but we can't quite get there." And he goes, "I can find him."
During this period, speed was critical. Intelligence often had a short shelf life. Targets moved, phones were discarded, and safe houses changed frequently. Acting quickly could mean the difference between capture and disappearance.
So brought him into the station the next day, and he signed all the secrecy agreements. And he took a piece of butcher block paper, and he wrote Abu Zubaydah in the center and circled it.
This kind of network mapping mirrors how Al-Qaeda itself was structured. The organization wasn't hierarchical in a traditional sense. It functioned more like a web of semi-independent cells connected through trusted intermediaries.
And then around Abu Zubaydah, he wrote every piece of information that we had. So around that second ring, he put a tertiary ring of everybody who was in touch with the people who were in touch with Abu Zubaydah, and then made connections between the secondary and tertiary levels. At the end of the week, it looked like a spider web.
By visualizing these connections, analysts could identify pressure points, locations, or individuals where the network became vulnerable. This approach had already been used successfully in previous operations to dismantle terrorist cells.
And he comes to me, he had to explain it to me, because it was very complicated. And he said, listen, I'm just not able to get this down to any fewer than 14 sites. I said, dude, it's not workable. We've never done more than two raids before in a single night. We can't hit 14 places simultaneously.
Large-scale synchronized raids were extremely rare. Coordinating even a few locations required precise timing, communication, and trust between units. Multiplying that to 14 dramatically increased the risk of failure or exposure.
So I cable headquarters, and I'm like, I don't know what to do. So they said, well, what do you need? In a perfect world. So I said, all right, I need 36 people. I need $10 million. I need weapons, ammunition, battering rams, bulletproof vests, helmets, walkie-talkies, satellite connectivity.
This reflects how counterterrorism operations evolved after 9/11. Funding and logistical support became far more flexible, allowing field teams to rapidly scale operations when a high-value target was believed to be within reach.
I'm telling you, within 48 hours, I had all of it. An unmarked 737 lands at the airport, and they just offload everything.
Unmarked aircraft and rapid deployment logistics were a hallmark of CIA operations during this era. These missions often operated outside traditional military channels, allowing for speed and deniability.
I drive down and introduce myself to the Pakistanis there. The guy that I was assigned to deal with, a brigadier general, General Muhammad, he said, your reputation precedes you. He said, my instructions are to do anything you tell me to do.
Despite cooperation on paper, relationships like this were often complicated. Trust had to be built quickly, even while both sides remained cautious about how much information they revealed.
I said, thank you. He said, what do you need first? I said, I need a real estate agent because we need to make some purchases.
Safe houses were a critical part of CIA tradecraft. These locations allowed teams to operate discreetly, stage equipment, and prepare for operations without drawing attention.
So we bought a 10-bedroom, 10-bathroom mansion, and we bought a 7-bedroom, 7-bathroom mansion, one in one city, one in the other. And I paid cash for both of these houses.
Cash purchases avoided paper trails. In intelligence work, minimizing documentation reduces the risk of exposure, especially in environments where local oversight could compromise the mission.
We bought a van. We had all of our equipment. We rented the entire floor of an A-list hotel, so we could use that as our temporary base before we got our safe houses set up. And we had enough weapons and ammunition to start a war. And so my colleague and I decide to do a dry run. So we went to each one of the 14 targets that day. We wanted to look for ingress and egress.
Entry and exit planning is fundamental. In unpredictable environments, having a clear escape route can determine whether a mission succeeds or collapses.
We wanted to make sure we weren't going into an ambush or a setup. You know, if everything sort of turned to shit and somebody started firing at us, we wanted to make sure that we had a way out, or we could defend ourselves while we were looking for a way out. Almost all of these sites were just 1 or 2 room. One of them was a shish kebab stand with a payphone. So we cut that site right away. As we were going through the University of Faisalabad campus, the analyst called me and he said, listen, I just got a call from a friendly Western intelligence service. And they said that they had a walk-in.
Intelligence sharing between allied services was common, but often incomplete. Sources were protected, and details were sometimes withheld. Human intelligence can provide breakthroughs, but it comes with uncertainty. Walk-ins may have valuable information, but their reliability is never guaranteed.
So he says, this walk-in says that there is a large, brightly painted house that's full of Al-Qaeda. And I said, okay, I want to talk to the walk-in. He said, no can do. I already asked. They said he's not available, which led me to believe that there was no walk-in, that it was a telephone intercept. And they didn't want to admit to us that it was a telephone intercept. Just as I hung up the phone with him, I was telling General Mohammed and my other colleague, I said, that was the analyst. He said, there's a big yellow house and it's right there. And it's full of Al-Qaeda. And General Mohammed says, I can tell you right now that something bad is happening in that house.
By this point in the war, intelligence agencies had learned that Al-Qaeda's strength came from its structure. It wasn't a centralized organization in the traditional sense. It functioned as a distributed network of cells, each capable of operating independently. This made it resilient. Removing one leader didn't collapse the system. Instead, analysts had to identify how information, resources, and communication moved through the network. That's why targeting shifted toward relationships rather than individuals. The goal wasn't just to find a person, it was to understand the system around them and where that system could be disrupted. Operations like this were designed not just to capture one target, but to expose everything connected to them.
I said, what makes you say that? He said, because it has to be 115 degrees right now, and all of the blinds are closed. It has to be roasting in there. And I said, we need to put a big team on that one. It turned out that there were more than 24 Al-Qaeda fighters in that house.
Wow.
Hold up. So that night at 10 o'clock, I stood on the coffee table in the safe house and I said, guys, we have to synchronize our watches. So we synchronized our watches, right? 10 o'clock, check. I said, here's what we're going to do. Get out of the car and exactly at 0200, break down the door and grab everybody inside. And my colleague and I climbed to the roof of the safe house in Faisalabad. And I looked at my watch and I said, 0200, here we go. And just as I said the words, we could hear this sound in the distance. Boink, 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 metal on metal, loud. And I said, that's not good. And then we heard shots fired. And I said, oh my God, shots fired.
Even the most carefully planned operations can change instantly. Once contact is made, control becomes limited and outcomes become unpredictable.
That's not good. And then the walkie-talkie starts crackling. And the guy on the ground's like, shots fired, right? So after the big yellow house, we only had one more site to go to. And the analyst called me back. And he said, Abu Zubaydah just made a terrible mistake.
High-value targets were usually captured when they broke their own rules, using a phone, staying in one place too long, or trusting the wrong system.
He said he downloaded his voicemail from a landline. And I said, oh my God, how could he make such an elementary mistake? He said, I don't know, but man, we have a physical address. I said, oh my God. Well, the physical address was Site 14, or 13 as it became. So we rush over there, so excited, and it turns out it's an empty field, just an empty field. And I said, no, this has to be wrong.
False leads were common. Intelligence rarely moved in a straight line. It required constant adjustment and interpretation.
This is a mistake. We're sure that the call came from this site. And General Mohammed says, no. He said, this is quite common in Pakistan. And so what poor people do is they'll climb the telephone pole, they'll splice the telephone wire that's assigned to the empty lot, and they'll run a wire to their house so they can make calls, and the phone bill goes to the owner of the lot. And I said, well, how do we find out where the wire's going? Because it looks like Medusa's head up there, right? There had to be 500 wires coming out of that thing. He calls this young technical officer from ISI. This kid climbs up the pole, and he goes through the wires, like this. Well, sorry. And finds this one wire, and he follows the wire literally down the pole like this, and then down the alley, and he goes, it's that house right there.
In the end, the breakthrough didn't come from advanced technology. It came from adapting in real time. Intelligence work often depends on combining high-level analysis with simple, on-the-ground problem-solving.
Wow. And see, I got chills again thinking of it. And my buddy and I high-fived each other, because the night before, he said to me, you think we're going to get him? And I said, no. I think we're going to get somebody, but I don't think we're going to get him. He's been too smart so far.
Abu Zubaydah was ultimately captured in March of 2002 during a joint U.S. and Pakistani raid in Faisalabad. At the time, he was believed to be one of Al-Qaeda's most senior operational figures, someone deeply involved in coordinating logistics, communications, and the movement of fighters across the network. His capture marked one of the first major successes of the global war on terror. It provided U.S. intelligence with insight into how Al-Qaeda operated internally, including how its members communicated, traveled, and maintained operational security. But it also signaled a shift in the war itself. Rather than large-scale military engagements, the conflict increasingly became a series of targeted operations, focused on identifying, tracking, and capturing individuals within a decentralized network. Operations like the one described here became the model going forward. Stories like this show how intelligence operations really work: uncertain, methodical, and often decided by the smallest details. If you want more breakdowns like this, drop a comment below and consider subscribing for more content.